Welcome everybody, and thank you for attending today's webinar all about what's new in Business Central as part of the Microsoft Dynamics Wave 1 2022 update. As always, the Microsoft focus is around working smarter and the multi-layer, multiplayer experience. We're using Teams gives you data-driven team decisions, where OneDrive helps you share and co-author files in the cloud, and where Outlook helps you to respond to business inquiries faster, with Excel helping you to analyse and edit data. My name is Danusha Jolliffe, and I'm the Marketing Director here at TVision, and I've got about 20 years of marketing experience across various business sectors. As usual, I'll be facilitating a session today, and as always, I'm joined by our amazing consultant, Ian Robinson, who'll be doing the demo. He's been here for about 5 years as well, just like me, and he's got a really detailed and specific knowledge of BC, NAV, and looks after our clients to help them get the most out of the system. So a few housekeeping items before we get started. Please do use the question box or chat function to ask any questions throughout, and they'll be answered as we go along. So I'll be keeping note of that and letting you know when you ask those questions. If we run out of time, or if your question requires a longer, more detailed answer, we can do that offline with you directly. And a link to watch the webinar on demand will be sent out afterwards for you to share with your colleagues. Now, here we've got a high-level list of the areas which have changed. And actually, they've come from over 270 community ideas. And this is where BC users can make a suggestion, and enough people comment and like that suggestion, it's scheduled for an addition to an upcoming release. And that's the power of the Business Central community. So the majority of changes today that Ian will be talking about are those within finance, but I'll also mention several other areas in passing, for example, Shopify, Outlook email, and also GDAP, so Global Delegated Admin Privileges. And those allow specific access to areas of your BC instance and only those areas, so we can't touch anything else other than what you grant us permission to do. And lastly, within reporting, we've done a webinar fairly recently on that one, so you can watch that on demand by looking at our website. Now, Ian, I'll be monitoring for questions and comments, but over to you for the demo.
All right, thanks, Danusha. So we are looking at the latest version of Business Central. I installed the updates that we're going to be talking about for Wave 1 a few days ago, so I've been playing with them. It's really important. You're going to get an email at some point in the near future from Tessa, part of our team, and she's going to tell you when you're going to have access to this functionality. And you can get onto your test system, you can have a play with that new functionality, make sure that it works for you, and see if there's anything there that you want to apply to your business. So if you do get those emails from Tessa, please act on them and do the testing, just to make sure that everything's 100% correct. So as Danusha mentioned, there's a lot of new stuff in this release, and a lot of it is finance based, so I'm going to spend most of my time talking about finance. So one of the things that has been changed is the ability to delete accounts on your chart of accounts. So you've always been able to do this, but now you get some control over how this happens. And if you look at your general ledger setup, you're going to notice that there are a couple of new fields that get added with this upgrade. And down here, you can block deletion of GL accounts. So you can make it impossible for people to delete a GL account. As I say, in the past, it was possible, as long as the account had a zero balance and there was nothing in the current financial year posted to that account, you could delete it. Now you can block that completely. Or you can put a date formula in there and say nobody can delete an account until, and you can put a date 5 years in the future. It's not going to prevent you from deleting an account, but it is going to give you a warning and say you shouldn't be deleting this account. Much better to just disable deleting of accounts completely unless you really want to delete them. Then come in, switch this to enable, and then turn it off again. When you do get your test system, please, and on your live system, make sure this is turned on. It's a nice security feature and it's well worth having. The other thing to notice is Microsoft's changed the way that they work with dates. So if you type in a 2-digit year, so for instance, the 1st of the 1st And if I just put in the year 20, it's going to assume I'm talking about 2020. But if I put in a date of 50, it's gone back to 1950. So if you put in a 2-digit year, anything from 50, it's going to think is the 1900s. Anything less than 50, it's going to assume it's in the 2000s. So just be aware of that when you're typing in 2-digit years. And that, I think, is going to be rolled out across the entire Microsoft platform, so even Excel and things like that will use that kind of logic. Another thing that's changed for anybody who's doing intercompany transactions, there's a couple of new options that are coming. They haven't been enabled yet, but I will just show you. You'll notice when I search for intercompany setup, you now get 2 identical options. If you click on the new one that hasn't yet been enabled, it just kind of gives you an error message. If you do get that error message, search again, choose a second option, it gives you the current setup. The new setup is going to let you choose which journals to use in the related company when you send an auto accept type transaction. Which journal does it go to on that company, not just into the default journal, for purchases and for sales. So you get those 2 extra options. It's not enabled yet, but it is coming. Now, a really nice feature is anybody using jobs, and you've probably had some frustration when you've got jobs where there's different sell tos and bill tos. And if we now have a look at jobs, we have the ability to choose different ship to and bill to customers on a job. So I'll just choose any one of these samples. And in the post, you just chose your customer up here. So this was for the School of Fine Art. But you now get some more options further down the list where you can say, who is the customer who's going to be paying the invoices? And where are you delivering the stuff to? So you might be delivering the things to the School of Fine Art, but maybe the invoice is going to XYZ Consulting. Or the other way around, School of Fine Art might be paying the bill, but you're delivering the stuff to one of their subcontractors, XYZ Consulting, to do the work. You can now split that out, which is a really nice addition. By default, both of these will fill with whichever customer you chose at the top, but you can go down there and you can change them if you want to. Very nice for you guys who are doing kind of job type postings. Another nice little tweak is when you're printing bank statements. So if we go to our bank accounts, I don't know if I set that up as a shortcut. I did, yes. So I've set it up as one of my shortcut menus. And when you look at one of your bank accounts, whether in the list view or whether you've drilled into the list, you do get the option to print statements. I'm never quite sure where these things are hidden. Might be in the history. No. And of course, I can't find it. No. Oh, trust me, it's there somewhere. I'm not going to waste your time looking for it. But there's now an option for all of the bank reconciliations that you've done with a particular bank. It will list them there. You can print them. So you can print ones going back in time. And the way that those printouts are presented, it's showing a little bit more information than it used to. It kind of shows you what's been checked off against what, which will help you if you've got a problem with the reconciliation that you want to go back and look at. It's a nice little tweak that I think some of you will find useful. Another nice little tweak is the ability to block certain postings. So on your general posting setup and your VAT posting setup, let's just have a look at the VAT posting setup. You might have changed the way that you've set things up, and perhaps you've got a VAT posting setup which is no longer valid. On my system here, I've got some of these that have a blank and I don't like people using them. So I can just come and I can block these setups. What's going to happen if somebody tries to post a transaction using a blank business posting group? It's going to stop them, they're going to get an error, and it's going to say that something needs to change in the VAT posting setup. In the post, to stop people using them, I would have deleted the GL accounts over here, which would have given them an error. But this is much nicer, my setup is still here, and if I need to go back and do an adjustment or a correction to something that was previously posted, I can unblock this one, I can go and do my correction, I can come back and block it. I don't have to remember which GL accounts I had set there. And the same can be done for your general posting setup. If you want to block people, say you don't do export orders anymore on your general posting setup, you can block all of the export group to stop people posting export invoices. So that's another really nice feature. Then we have a feature which we've created an extension for some of our clients to do this. It's now become a standard feature within BC. So you have a situation where on your company information page, you put a bank account. When you print a sales invoice or a statement, it puts your company's bank account at the bottom. It gets it from that company information page. But sometimes you're sending out to overseas clients and you don't want them to use that bank account, you want them to use a different bank account. So for some of you guys, you've got an extension that we've written for you that does this. If you've got that extension, carry on using it, it does still work. And if you try and use this new functionality, our extension is actually going to override that and it will still be using the extension anyway. But if you want to start doing this and you don't have this extension yet, you can go to your bank accounts, and for any of your bank accounts, let's say our bank account that's in euros, I can say that this is the default bank account for this currency. So now if I printed or if I issued a sales invoice or a customer statement, for example, in euros, it would actually print this bank account's details on that invoice instead of the default one in pound sterling. So this is a really nice feature. As I said, if you're using our extension, please carry on using it, it will still work. The next one is another one where we've got a few clients who also wanted this functionality. And again, if you're already using it, please carry on using it. And that is consolidating customers and suppliers. So for some businesses, you might have somebody who's a supplier to your business and they're also a customer of your business. And it's really nice at the end of the month, instead of them paying you and you paying them, if you could consolidate those two together and whatever's the balance, you just pay them the outstanding amount and you write off the difference between those two accounts. So if I go and have a look at my customers, and I think it was Tray Research that I set up as both a supplier and a vendor, and I can see that their balance that they owe me as a customer is 2,200. As a vendor, I owe them 6,079. That's really useful, just having that information on one screen, but it goes even further. If you go to a payment journal, you get a new function where you can net off those two things against each other. So on a payment journal, where you had the options up in the ribbon to suggest vendor payments, you now have an option to net off customer and vendor balances. That will go through the system, and if you've got a vendor who's also a customer, it will take off what they owe you and only suggest that you pay the balance to them. That's a really neat little feature. Yeah.
Someone just asked, do you have to do that per customer vendor, or can you apply that across your whole instance?
Right, so there is a little bit of setup that you need to do. So even though I haven't set up any of these other customers as vendors as well, so if I just clicked on School of Fine Art, You'll see those fields are available here. It doesn't show anything because there is nothing to show in this field. It's 0 and it's not drilled. You can't drill down on this. But you would have to go to the contact for each customer or vendor. So in Tray Research, I went to Helen Ray's contact and I said, set Tray Research up as a vendor as well as a customer.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so a little bit of setup, but it's a really nice feature, really easy to use. Another nice feature, and the finance guys are going to love this one, deferrals. So the idea of a deferral, you pay something or you receive some money up front, but it's for a 12-month period. So you pay the rent in advance. You want it to go into your books as 12 separate transactions instead of just the one transaction that you pay. So you use a deferral for that. But in order to use that, whoever's posting it needs to be able to post into those future periods. And perhaps you're reluctant to open up those posting dates so broadly for people, and maybe that's stopping you use deferrals, or maybe you're lumping all of that work onto one person instead of letting other people do it. There is a beautiful new feature on the general ledger setup and on the user setup. I'll just look at the general ledger setup. And again, it's a couple of new fields. So you've got your standard allow posting from and to, but then you can say allow deferrals to post in a broader date range. So on this system, everybody can post for the month, but for deferrals, they can post for an entire year. And on the user setup, you can do that as well if you've got one person that you want to override these defaults. And giving you that extra control, it might make deferrals more attractive to you, or you might be able to spread that workload across more people instead of dumping it all on one person. The next one is, it's a really interesting one. This is something that's been available in the US versions of Business Central and NAV even for quite some time, and it's now being made available to us here in the UK. And this is the idea of a bank deposit. And you would use a bank deposit when, you know, a check is deposited in your bank account, but it's for multiple things. And I can set up a new bank deposit, and I can say which bank account money has been put into. I'll just say into my checking account. What is the total of this deposit? It was £1,000. I can put in my default dimensions, but then down here I can start saying what this deposit was for. Probably not for a GL account, it was probably for a customer. I can say which customer it was who deposited this, date and corporation for argument's sake, and I can put in some text here to say, you know, this was a deposit for something. I can put in a document number, and I can say how much of this was the deposit. For that same customer, there was paying an invoice perhaps, and I could say which invoice this is for 800. And once I've balanced it off, I can post. That's going to post separate transactions in your customer ledgers and in your general ledger for all these different things, but it's going to appear when you're doing a bank recon as a single number. So you're doing your bank recon, it's really easy to do your recon because that 1,000 balances with 1,000 on your bank statement. In your system, in the general ledger, it's been split up into its component parts. So you can look at it both ways, as the lump sum or as the individual payments. So this is a nice feature that you might want to start using. Might be something interesting for you. And you can leave those bank deposits open. If you're not sure exactly what was it for, you didn't receive a remittance advice, you can leave it open, and when you get a remittance advice, you can go back to it and you can say, ah, that's what it was for, type in the details and post. So it's a nice new feature, it's worth having a look at. Another really simple little feature is bulk releasing and reopening documents. So I'm stuck on the sales side, I'll stay with sales. So I think sales invoices, let's have a look at those. I hope I have some on the system. Yes, I do. So I've got a whole host of documents here. I might have a procedure that in the morning I look at my documents and I release the ones from yesterday that need releasing. So I can come here now, I can select more, and it's this one and this one and this one, and I can click release, and it will now release them in bulk. And it will tell me I'm selected 4, it's going to release all of them, yes. And it's done the job. And I can come back to this now and I can say, whoops, I made a mistake. I want to reopen them, but I'll accidentally try and reopen these ones that are already open. And if I say release, reopen, it tells me I've selected 4, but it's going to skip 2 of them because they're already open. So it just gives me that little visual cue that maybe I've done something wrong. But now I can do these bulk processes. Maybe I release all yesterday's sales orders for the warehouse in the morning. I can come in, I can do it in bulk instead of one by one. How are we doing for time, Danusha?
Yep, good.
Good, all right. So that's a lot of financy stuff that I've spoken about there. There's other stuff as well on the inventory side. If you're doing any kind of manufacturing and you have non-inventory items, the demand forecasting module has been updated, that now you can start forecasting those non-inventory items as well. Danusha mentioned there's a Shopify connector. It is now built into Business Central to hook up to your Shopify web presence where you have a web store. And it is, I think Microsoft have either bought or they've bought shares in Shopify, yeah. And they're integrating the two of them so that Business Central is going to have a web shop front end built in, which is, again, fantastic if that's what you're interested in. There's the option of when preparing reports, you can now share them via OneDrive as well as printing them to Excel, etc., which is also nice. Danusha mentioned GDAP, Granular Delegated Admin Privileges. And this is nice. This is where maybe you've got an IT firm that looks after most of your IT and TVision are just looking after your Business Central SES. You can now give us access to your Business Central SES management in the back end on the Microsoft side, but not allow us to look at your other stuff, your email setup, your domain setup, your SQL Server setup, etc. In the past, we either saw everything or nothing. Now you can say, oh, we're allowed to look just at your BC stuff and we can manage that for you. And you can deny your IT providers from looking at your BC stuff. They can just look at the emails and the domain controllers, etc. So you can split that out. So anybody who's reluctant to give TVision access because we can see things we shouldn't, you now have the ability to give us access to just what we're supposed to see, which is really nice. Other little things that they've done, reporting on account schedules. They now have by default 15 columns. That allows you to put in 12 months plus a total, plus a column, a row number, plus a description, all on one screen, which is an improvement on the 13 that it used to be. When you go and do find documents that navigate from the old nav terminology to see related transactions, there's now more details that you can get when you're doing that find documents. Yeah, and then there's things that might not be so relevant to you, but it's that Microsoft continuing to advance things. So if you're doing business in, I think it's Czechoslovakia, there's now a whole raft of extensions that have been launched to comply with Czechoslovakian law. They've also released updates for a lot of countries around the Mediterranean, North Africa. If you're doing business in those countries, it's now possible to have BC compliant with those countries' laws. And then there's a lot of back-end changes that make it easier for us to write programs and things as well. But that's what I wanted to show you. Danusha, any questions to go through?
So one of the questions was, it sounds like there's a lot going on, and obviously this is only a snapshot, and obviously there's a lot of finance in there that you were talking about. how can somebody find out exactly what's in there and what do they do next? I mean, I know I was going to cover it a little bit, but if you could sort of overview, that would be great.
I think you might have it on one of the slides. Yeah, you can go to Microsoft if you search.
I've got that link.
Just in Google, if you search for Business Central Wave 1 2022, there's a list of every change that's been made. A lot of them are not relevant to you. There's back-end stuff, programming stuff. It talks about AL, AI. You can ignore that stuff and you can concentrate at the top of the list is the things that you probably find interesting, where it talks about consolidating customers and vendors and different sell tos and build tos on jobs, things like that. That's towards the top of the list. Have a look. You can read through why they've done it. And it gives you on some of them, actually the screens that you need to go to and what you need to click to see that functionality. It also mentions on a lot of them whether it was something that Microsoft wanted to do or whether it was something that came from the user community where they said, oh, please, can we have this function? And they've included it. And I think Danusia mentioned it earlier, yeah. If you've got a good idea, go to Microsoft's website, put in the idea. If enough people like it and they say, oh, good idea, it might be in the 2023 release.
Oh, great, thank you. Can you advance the slides?
Okie dokie.
So Ian's mentioned all of these things in the demo earlier, and as we've already said, there's an awful lot included in the release, and we just took a snapshot of what we thought you might be interested in. So this is just a highlight of the 10. So next steps, what we'd like you to do is try out this functionality when it becomes available. So you'll be receiving an email from Tessa here from TVision with an invitation to test your instance over the next month or so. And just to be aware, they do get staggered and you'll have a specific length of time to test, which is usually about a fortnight. And we'll then schedule the update for you within a month or so. So as Ian mentioned, that's the URL that you can take a look at for the changes that are being implemented, and it tells you all about what's in that Wave 1 plan, and it gives you the overview there, etc. So if there's anything in there that you are interested in, you can get in touch with Ian and ask a little bit more, and obviously start doing that. So thank you so much for joining us today. So this webinar will be available on demand soon, and the links will be shared on our social channels as always, and in the next newsletter. Thanks very much for joining us today. Thank you, Ian.
All right, cheers, guys. Thanks.
Bye.